The answer to that question, sir, is we are not the only ones. The county does maintain a few ponds. They too do not have, to the extent we do, the numbers of ponds.
And how do they do it? Do they contract out, or do they have their own staff?
They do that in-house, sir, to my knowledge.
And this request is for both Kannapolis City and for Cabarrus County schools.
Yes, sir.
So that's 50-some schools, is that correct?
It's a total of 32 ponds.
32 ponds.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This is a silly question, but I'll ask it anyhow. Would these 3 roles be working 40 hours a week for 50 weeks of the year at these functions?
Yes, sir.
Of maintaining the ponds?
Yes, sir. The best estimate that we can give you is it would take us in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 years to get the ponds to the condition and maintained at the level that they need to be maintained at. That's not to say that in an emergency or in an extreme need that these personnel could not be used in other functions.
And do you have anyone on staff who could take on some of these duties in a part-time or half-time role? And I know that the person needs to be certified by the state and licensed to do the work, but is there anyone on staff who could split their role to
I think
do
there's
this?
just a little bit of confusion on the qualifications for these people. This is not someone that has to be certified by the state. It's someone that has to be experienced in dealing with these drainage ponds. So
I
we
apologize.
do have, no, it's okay. We do have a gentleman who has all along as a part of the staff monitored, and we also have, as many of you may know, a actual civil engineer on the staff. So these personnel would train the ones that we're bringing on board and to fill these positions.
Any motions or any changes to this list?
I have one proposed change.
All right.
I don't know if you've been to any middle school athletic field, but you only have to go to the last 2 that we've opened, Winkler and Hickory Ridge, to know that those athletic fields are neglected. I don't know another way to say it. I think the grass is mowed on them, but I don't think there's anything else that, and we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on those fields, and I move that we switch 2 and 3 because I think if you go out there and by the time we vote on this, please do that if you get a chance to just see the condition of the middle school fields. And it's not because the people at the school level don't want them to be better. They can, but there's no budget there. There's no resources. We're still trying to get athletic directors an additional planning period. So there's just no time and plan there, and I think this would go a little bit of the way to help develop a plan. So that's my motion. Switch 2 and 3.
All right. Mr. Powell's made a motion to switch or move number 3, which is the sport field maintenance, into the second position and move the single technician for soil and water conservation down. Is there a second to that motion?
Be it that it's the safety of our kids running on these fields, I'll second that.
Okay, so I have Vince. All right, is there any more discussion on this particular component or this item?
Well, I guess my concern is that apparently we have a legal obligation to maintain these ponds. So whether we fund it this way or not, we're still going to have to find a way to fund it. It means doing one less project, I guess, in the maintenance list. So I absolutely agree with Vince on the need, but it just seems to me like we need to meet our legal priorities first. So I think the current priorities are, well, I'll vote against it because I think the current priorities are correct.
Any other comments or discussion on this item? I feel the same way as Dr. Phillips. If we get fined for our ponds not being maintained, or at least showing the aspect, then that fine would probably be close to the number that we're looking at the sports field, so I will not be voting for this particular motion for that reason. All right, board members, let's go to vote. All in favor of moving sports field maintenance for the middle school up to position number 2, say aye. Aye. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So we're split. All in, not in favor. All opposed of this, say aye. Aye. So it's 3-3. So unfortunately, it doesn't get moved. And Carolyn will be here next week, and she will. She'll break the tie for us. So, all right, folks. All right, next one.
Now we're ready to go to our continuation items, and unfortunately, we don't get a lot of choice in these items, but we're going to go over the impact that these items will have on our system. And it's page 20 in your board docs. So the first item that we generally review is a provision to increase our locally paid staff to match our state paid increase. And of course, we don't know exactly what that is now, but when the state finalizes a pay increase, and we'll update that. This is a best guess right now. So we're expecting our beginning teachers to go from $33,000 to $35,000, and so that's the amount that it would cost us. And right now, in that proposal, there's no other pay increase for our other staff. It's just our beginning teachers. So it costs $115,488. The next one would be the provision to increase employers' retirement costs to match the state. So everyone that we pay locally, the retirement matching goes up. That rate goes up, so we have to pay that. So that's a cost that we just have to take care of. $184,180. The next one, again, is very similar, increase in employers' hospitalization costs for our locally paid employees. So the cost we're expecting approximately a 5%. Again, we do not have concrete numbers. These are estimations. $140,300. The next one is a provision to increase in the utility cost. We're estimating a 1% increase in our utilities. That would be $51,000 for us. The next item would be to add local supplement for additionally paid state teachers for growth. So we, based on the projections from the state, and that's what we have to use right now, the state is saying we're expected to be $30,714. We believe with our local projections we'll be higher than that, but for right now the state is calculating our growth on $30,714. Sorry, $31,249. I picked up the wrong number. That's 535 additional students. With that, you would estimate an additional 21 teachers. Well, the state will pay their salary, but the state's not going to pay the local supplement. So we have to ask for that from our local county, and we, of course, have to pay the benefits on that. So that's approximately, that's $69,973.
Ms. Cluck, let me ask on
Sure.
this year our student growth was a little over 700 and some, so it was about 200 above the state estimate.
Right.
Okay. And the county made that whole to us, though. They were, so even though we
did.
presented this number, once the real number came in, they adjusted their budgetary number accordingly. Is that
And
correct?
that was the first time in ever.
Oh, okay. So that was, for the first time in forever, they actually adjusted the number for us. Okay. Well,
Right.
That's good. Okay, because I'm
So
looking
we'll-
at this number, and this is like not even 1.5%
We're hoping to keep that trend.
growth, and I just can't see that happening. Thank you.
Right.
Can we give them a better estimate? Is that?
They like to have the documentation that the state provides. The state gives me a piece of paper that says this is your projection, and that's what they want to base their numbers on. Certainly, we give them our numbers. We'll give them everything that they ask for, but they like to have the number that the state gives them.
How close is it to the ORAD study number?
Our number is,
I mean, they paid for the ORAD study number. You think they
the
want to use
ORAD.
that?
I'm sorry, I don't think I
They
understood.
paid for the ORAD study number. You think that might be something that they could go with?
If they continue to shore us up like they did this past year, then we have no worries. Everything is wonderful. If they don't shore us up, then we have some concerns.
Are you going to give the county what our projection is going to be?
Yes, we certainly will.
Okay, because that would be more closer to 700 to 800, will it not be? Or even more?
Or even more.
What are you thinking?
We just finished those, and this past year our numbers were very similar to the state, and we were a couple hundred below. So we also came up with about 500, and we were below. This year our number is between 800 and 1,000. Right now it's closer to 1,000, and the state is predicting 500. So that's a little bit off, and so I think we would be very comfortable in saying 800 because we don't want to be too conservative. But it's always a little bit of a guess. But right now we think it'll be closer between 800 and 1,000, but the state has said 500. So.
Okay, and we'll move on to the next provision. It's for the loss of state driver's education funding and to supplement the funding to replace our aging vehicle fleet. And so we had a significant discussion in Budget Committee about this topic, and Ed has the documents available if you want to dive into that discussion. But there's discussion that the driver's ed funding, state funding, is being removed. And so we're preparing to ask for that. There's no intention to remove the requirement to provide driver's education, but there is an intention of removing the funding. So the funding that we get from the state is $531,238. And in addition, we collect the fee from the parents and the students, parent or student, to help supplement the funding, because the state has cut the funding over the last couple of years, but we were able to replace it with the fee. So we're asking in anticipation of that funding being removed, we're asking for $671,238 of local funds to replace that. This is one of those unknowns. It may or may not be removed this year, and they may sunset it, and we may keep the funding one more year and then have to prepare for it the following year. So we're putting it out in front of everybody and putting it in our budget request, and we're hoping that it doesn't go away, but we all need to be prepared for it. We need to make our county aware of it. The county was in our budget meetings and certainly had a lot of questions and discussions about it, and we've given them some additional information about it, and can provide that same information to you. The funding that we've had over the last 3 years has not been enough funding to maintain our fleet. Our vehicles are old. We buy used vehicles, and then we drive them until we shouldn't drive them any longer. So over the last 3 years, we replaced 6 of them with 6 used vehicles that we pay $10,000 or under to purchase, and that's certainly not adequate. It doesn't keep our.
Are they specialized vehicles?
Pardon, not normally. Only if we have a special ed situation or something. I think we have one or so. I don't know if Robert's in the. No, Robert's not in the audience. I think there's one that has a specialized equipment on it, but most of them are not. But no, they're just normal vehicles.
So it looks like we're going to have some out-of-the-box thinking to continue this, or
I think we're going to have to consult with our attorney as to whether we have options. If the state does not fund something, but says that we have to continue to do it under our own expense, I would like to talk to you about the odds of us getting hauled into court, and if so, our odds of winning with a jury of our peers adjudicating.
Or is it something that can be contracted out?
We can look into it, and it would depend on how the requirement for continuing to provide the services is made by the state. The initial thought that comes to my mind is typically when there is a mandate by the state, if you fail, or the federal government, if you fail to agree with it, you put yourself in jeopardy of losing other benefits or other dollars from the state. And so that would be my initial concern is, could they tie it to something else if we did not agree to continue to provide this service? But we certainly could look at that and respond accordingly.
And I know it's a separate conversation. We're talking budget here, but we still, by state law, cannot charge any more than $65. Is that correct? To each driver's ed student. So we're boxed in that way as well. Is the only point I'm making.
We expect if the $65 is the current fee that we can charge, but we're waiting. If they remove the funding, we're waiting to see how that changes. We would expect it to change. It costs. Cabarrus County Schools provides driver's education for $256 per student. That's our cost that associated. The state average cost for driver's education is $283 per student. And if you take private, the average cost for private driver's education is $400 per student. So, of course, we do it very efficiently and effectively. And it probably has a lot to do with we don't have a good fleet, and we're not replacing our fleet the way that we need to. But certainly, even if we were, we could still provide it for a very inexpensive price.
I mean, similar to what we have, bring your own technology, or are there ways that they can use their own vehicles or a family vehicle?
Are there ways to use?
That would cut down, you would think, on the number of vehicles needed.
If you'll pull the expense report up over the last 3 years, we provided the expenses associated with the program over the last 3 years as a document to the budget committee and to the county. And what you'll see is it's, for the most part, it's labor. We're providing our drivers. We're paying our drivers. We're paying our for the fuel. We're paying for the insurance on the car. So the thing that you can remove in that situation is the insurance on the car and the fuel, obviously. I guess if you want parents to drive their own cars.
Yeah, but then you'll probably add time to because now you're going down to onesie, twosie.
Yeah.
There's a Senate Bill 515 that's going to possibly restore funding. So, if you will, write your Congress, your senator and your House representative for the state, and tell them to vote for maintaining funding for this for driver's education, and that will at least keep $531,238 from the local, not going out locally. We still need about $140,000 to repair the fleet, but that would eliminate $500,000 of cost from the local taxpayer if the state would just maintain the mandate that they have forced it upon us.
And just some information for you, Mr. Walter. Several years ago, when the state cut the driver's education budget and we were having a significantly hard time just keeping our head above the water, the driver's ed program cut the salaries of the drivers and reduced it just to be able to maintain that budget. So we've looked at many ways to maintain and cut that budget. They went from most of the time you have certified teachers that are driving as instructors, and we changed their pay structure from a certified teacher pay down to just a flat rate. and it saved the program a lot of money, but it had to be
I
done.
mean, I appreciate the effort. I'm more like Jeff. It's an unfunded mandate that we have to do, and it's taking money from, obviously we have a lot of needs, and
Well, it's cost shifting. I mean, it's risk shifting. The state is not giving us the flexibility to do anything, but they're pushing the charge or the cost down to the local level anyhow. They're nudging the local districts to make some of these hard choices with local dollars as opposed to keeping the status quo. They're taking it off the backs of the state as a whole and pushing it down to the locals. So that's what it is. It's not fair, it's not right, but that's what the state actually is what their calculations are leading to.
Yeah, it averages out to about a quarter cents per hundred that we're having to, just because if they make us eat this $500,000 locally, then everybody here part of their property tax will go for driver's education, of which we also do driver's education for a certain percentage of students that are not within our system, charter school students as well as private school and homeschool students all have to be taken care of out of this same money. So the 256 is not just for the 30,000 plus students in this system, but it's also for the charter school students, private school students, and homeschool students that are also in this county that we don't get reimbursed for the homeschool and private school from the state. The state divvies up money for the charter school and for public school.
Okay. So the next provision that we're asking for is a provision for staffing for Odell. So that would be W.R. Odell Elementary School for the planning of that school. So we'll ask for a principal. The state will pay for 3 months of that planning, and we'll need to pay for 3 months of the planning to have 6 months of planning for that principal to come in January 2016. Then we would ask for the assistant principal. We would want 4 months for that assistant principal to come in early. And then we would need support staff, and we generally ask for 12 months, 6 months for 2 staff members. The total on that would be $79,583, and that's where we would also add the construction position there in that one. Okay.
that goes to the question with the county. How is Kannapolis doing with their school? Because if they fund apparently if they fund these positions, at the last one of those meetings we were at earlier this year, if they fund this position for us, they've got to give Kannapolis a certain percentage of money, if they need it or not.
So in continuation and operation, regardless of whether it's this or anything, there's the same percentage. You know, Kannapolis gets their percentage, and we get our percentage. So I think what they were trying to do was get their school open the same year we do, so that we get our operating costs and they get our operating costs, and we impact it in the same year. I don't know the answer to your question, how is Kannapolis doing, but we can certainly get that information and get that back to you. But ideally, that's the goal, is to get them opened in the same fiscal year where the monetary impact is on operating. Okay, and the last provision is for the operating cost. And this is just for a half a year, because we would be, the construction would, ideally, should be done. I'm not the construction person, so I'm not tying you to a construction timeline. I'm just saying that for operating and financial purposes, I would expect to pick up the operating cost in January. So those would be the phone, the natural gas, the waste management, the electricity, the water, sewer, and the property insurance. All of those things, when the construction is done and we're released to go in the building, the contractor stops paying for it, and I have to start picking that up. So we would ask for half of those operating costs this fiscal year, and then we would ask for the other half in the next fiscal year. So that's $65,000. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
I have one. So going back up to the line item for the 1% increase in utility costs. I know there had been some questions from the county that, well, we've put in a lot of energy efficiency improvements, new lighting and all that, so shouldn't we be seeing a decrease in your utility costs? And I'm just wondering, have you been able to clarify with them why we're still asking for an increase in utility costs?
So we have seen a decrease in our utility budget overall, and because of again, the cuts that we see and all of the budget requests so if you take a look at last year's budget request and continuation request and all of the things that weren't funded, but we still had to pay, those are the types of things that when we save in utility costs, we have to move those dollars over to pay for these required mandated things that we didn't get additional funds for. So certainly, if we got all of the funds that we asked for, then I would probably be the first person to say, oh, we've saved this money, here you go. But we're never in a situation where we get all the money that we ask for, and we're not even in the situation where we get the money that we have to survive. So when we saved, if you look at, and I know you probably don't want to do that, if you look at the provision for last year, the budget for our utility cost was $5.2 million, and if you look at it here on this document, it's $5.1 million. I was able to adjust the budget back $100,000, but I had to take that $100,000. That's money that we saved. We did a great job. We did exactly what you said we did, but we had to take that money and had to put it with retirement cost and health insurance and all of those things that weren't funded, that we put it on our budget request last year. Does that help?
It helps me. I was just waiting to make sure that the
county
county
understands
when they see this. It's like, oh, okay. That's a very good point, that the baseline for this year is actually lower than the baseline for last year's. Okay.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
So we
Board members, next week we will be voting on this.
We will be voting. I've drafted the changes that you changed. So we'll come to you expecting a vote. Okay. On the 13th. All right. Thank you.
All right, board members, we're now into the action agenda items. First off, Ms. Monroe, I have something before we get into 5.01. Recently, we approved the renaming of Odell to Odell Primary and Odell Elementary. For some reason, we neglected to put the initials on that, and it should have been W.R. Odell Primary and W.R. Odell Elementary. And so I just want to make sure that none of you board members has an objection to the initials. I think everyone knows the short version of Odell, and we just didn't see that the proposal didn't have the WR on it, and it should have. So, well, we can have another vote.
Why don't we have a vote and put it on the consent agenda for next week?
Okay.
Can we agree to that?
Yes, we could. I just need a motion to add this.
Okay, so I make a motion that we put on the consent agenda rename the Odell schools W.R. Odell Primary and W.R. Odell Elementary School.
Right. So I had Dr. Phillips, and I think Mr. Powell beat you to it.
Me to it.
Yeah. And so Vince seconded it. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, so this will be on the consent agenda for next week, Ms. Monroe. All right, now we can move on to agenda item 5.01. Mr. Taylor is up in front of us. It is an email that we got this week, post haste, to give us information that we can hopefully make a decision on tonight, dealing with some of our roofs. So,
Yes, sir.
come and tell us all about it.
I would like to request tonight that that you give approval for the roofing bids and approve the bid tabs and award of the contracts to the responsible low bidders in this process. And I'm asking this tonight in order to give me an extra 7 days to try to make the timelines that were stipulated when these awards were funded through mediation. And the board at that time had requested that, if at all possible, to get this finished by the end of fiscal year. And it's very possible that we will get the Weinkauf and Rocky River replacements substantially complete or complete by the end of fiscal year. The Northwest Middle School roof, which is a metal roof, a different type, because of the lead times and processing of the materials for that, August 25th is our target date for that one, so the opening of school. And I believe it's very possible to be substantially complete or complete at that time. And I believe this is one of the topics tonight where you're going to have some good news. The bids came in at very reasonable prices, and in no way by rescoping these projects are you receiving any less of a quality roof. We're putting on a 60 mil PVC membrane on Weinkauf and Rocky River, and at Northwest you're receiving a metal roof, which is the intended roof for that structure. I'm very pleased with the way the bidding came out. I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right, Mr. Walter.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about who these companies are and what these alternates are.
Yes, sir. Southern Metal was recommended to us by the consultant. They are a very good company. They come with very good recommendations. We did do quite a bit of due diligence on both companies that received the bids. And the base bid is for covering the main structures with the metal roof. There is a alternate number 2 that we are accepting for $10,000, is to replace and repair the drain system coming off of the roof. If you've been out there during a rain or any type of event like that, the water does not run through the drains, it actually runs across the sidewalks at the school. So we're trying to repair that to make the water flow and the erosion properties, have those taken care of. The alternate number 3 is actually for the small overhang structure between the two buildings, to cover it in the same metal roof, give it the same life expectancy, life cycle. It has now, I believe, an EPDM rubber membrane across the top of it. And basically, as we put this metal roof on Northwest, the life of the roof will probably exceed the life of the building. So this is a very good option, and it's going to work very well for us. On the Weinkauf and Rocky River replacements, those are the 2 PVC roofs that we were discussing. And we took the base bid, and then the other one, the alternate is called safety equipment. We have had 2 men that have had accidents related to falling off roofs. This is a part, as we're saving this money, getting these reduced prices, we're going to add safety devices to the roof so that these men can wear harnesses, utilize safety lines, and prevent these type accidents from happening in the future. So we're kind of knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone.
And the other question was Weinkauf and Rocky River, they're basically the same layout, same design. Why are the difference in price?
Okay, the difference in price is to cover, and some of you may be aware that the metal portion of Weinkauf's roof has quite a bit of rust, and it's basically dissimilar metal corrosion. That's to repair that portion of it. We found that the roof at Rocky River was not experiencing that, so that was not factored in for Rocky River.
Thank you, and I
Yes, sir.
appreciate the pictures and the that you've been giving us on
Yes, sir.
status, and hope that continues.
All right, board members, any more discussion on this?
So, given the total number with the alternates that you're recommending, are we below what was originally budgeted?
Yes, sir, substantially.
Okay.
At this point, we know that we will have enough funding to do a fourth roof, which was our goal in rescoping these. It is very probable that if the market holds constant with the pricing, that we may be able to do the 5 roofs that we discussed. And the other 2 being J. Robinson High School and Mount Pleasant High School.
Great.
Can you document, the insurance committee had a meeting a few weeks ago discussing workers' comp types of claims, historically at least. Can you document the safety equipment portion of these bids, however we proceed with them, so that the people who handle the workers' comp claims have that documentation about the safety equipment?
Yes, sir. And actually, I think the best manner in which to do that would be the way that we will incorporate them into our PM program. So they will be on a PM cycle to be inspected to make sure they're in good repair and will do the job that they are intended for.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, board members, I need a motion to approve the roofing contracts as presented for Rocky River Elementary School, Winecoff Elementary School, and Northwest Cabarrus Middle School.
So, second.
David Harrison, Tim Furr seconded it. All right, any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries, Ms. Monroe.
Thank you very much.
All right. 6.01 is the adoption of the Soil and Water Proclamation for 2015. And this should be on consideration for next week. Is there any discussion on this? This will be a proclamation that the Soil and Water Proclamation for 2015, and the Board of Education is going to adopt the attached document proclamation. We do this every year for this stewardship week. Where does it say aye? Are you looking at the document? No, I haven't gotten to the document. I didn't think I had to open it up.
Can we change it to Cabarrus County's Board of Education does hereby proclaim?
All right. Did you get that change, Ms. Monroe? All right. With that change, should we put that on consideration agenda? Okay. Huh? Consent. Consideration. Consent. Yeah, let's consider it for consent.
Throwing us off.
Hey, you guys, just making sure that you know it's almost 9 o'clock. Okay, moving on. Budget amendments. Ms. Kelly Klutz. Board members, going into this, I will let you know this is the item that Ms. Carpenter would like to talk with Ms. Klutz about, but she asked if it could be put on the action agenda for next week. Okay. But I would entertain any other questions that you may have on these budget amendments, but it will be on the action items list for next week.
Okay, so we'll start with this state budget amendment. Oh, I didn't get it pulled up, did I? Okay. So the first one is the after-school quality grant, also called Aspire. Most of that grant goes towards salaries and also contracted services. We pay Camp Invention for incorporated with that grant. Also, we pay for transportation for the students during the summer, or the after school, sorry. In addition, you're also going to see the sales tax refund in a couple of the budget amendments that we're bringing to you this month. Also, you're seeing the shore up of the NCVPS funding. So they take, the first of the year, they take 75% of that based on the projections of what we're going to use at the beginning of the year.
What is that acronym?
North Carolina Virtual Public Schools. And then this time of the year, they see how many we've used, and they give us a shore up of they take that out of our allotment. And so when we looked at, I pulled the actual to see how many we used versus how many we projected. We were within like 2. It was really close, really good. So, and that's not always the case. We normally use a lot more than what they project us out. So that's that allotment. And then, of course, we get fines and forfeitures for school technology, and that's just the $529 there. So overall, Kelly says thanks. Overall, an increase in state funds. Are there questions about the state budget amendment? Okay. Oh, I actually have that projection. They project us at 1,372 courses, and we took 1,374 courses. So we were within 2 courses. Okay. So the next one is our federal budget amendments, and again, we're seeing all of the state sales tax refund there, or the sales and use tax refund. And so the way that works is we get the refund, and then that goes back into the program, and we spend it back on the program. So, for example, if we use the federal dollars for exceptional children, we get a refund on that, so that money goes back into exceptional children, and we spend it again on exceptional children, so it's back into the same program, and that's why you see it here. There's just a reclassification of Title I funds there on the bottom for you.
What is parent liaison?
Parent liaison is where, do you want to talk about the parent liaison position in the Title I?
So a portion of the Title I budget has to be spent on building relationships with the families, and so some schools choose to do that through a funded position that they choose to fund at the school level. Typically a parent liaison works with their parents, and
So it's an actual position, not additional duties of some other.
exactly. Yeah. A lot of times that person is a Spanish-speaking person, so they can communicate with our Hispanic families in particular.
Okay. Other questions on the federal? Okay. So we'll go to the capital outlay. And these are budget amendments that we've talked about in previous budget amendments in previous board meetings. So the county, when we requested funds for Odell, there was an amount in contingency that we had placed in contingency, and they said, we'll hold those funds at the county. We're not going to give you those funds, and when you need those, you ask the county manager for them, and we'll allocate them to you. And that's what happened. We asked for some funds for some unsuitable soil, and they said, okay, we'll allocate those to you. So you're going to see these as they come. I'm going to have to bring a budget amendment to you, but that's what happens here. The next one is the request that we made to the county last month, and they approved. The $839,000 is the access to Highway 73. You're seeing those. And in addition, the $30,000 that we requested for Royal Oaks, and the county approved for that one too last month. So those, yes, sir?
Just so we haven't made a determination yet as to the location for Royal Oaks, should this item for $30,000 for the engineering be deferred until a later date? Or do we need to do this in this package as it is?
This was a funding request that we needed to do this geotechnical and surveying in phase 1 all prior to making that decision, so that you could have the information to make the decision.
Oh, I beg your pardon. All right, thank you. All
right. In addition, the last item is the money that DPI gives us, what happens is they replace the yellow school buses on a replacement cycle, but they lease those because they don't have enough money in their budget to buy and replace those. So they have to lease them, and when they lease them, we actually literally do the financing and the paperwork and responsible. So that money has to come down and funnel through us, and we have to pay that. So that's why you see this, but it's really just a pass-through, and we have to budget it here, and you'll see it every single year that it comes through. Okay? Any questions on those?
Do you know how many buses that entails?
How many buses that particular one was? This was probably multiple years, so they do the leases on a 4-year cycle. I can go back and tell you how many buses we had in, fiscal year 12 and 13 and 14, because they're just making the payments on it. And I can give you a schedule on how many we're doing each year.
So explain why we have to adjust it again if we already know what it is. So we already know this amount.
We do it when DPI sends the money to us.
Okay, so we don't budget until it's not something we budget?
Well, they generally adjust and add more every year. So, I mean, we can budget for what we know from the previous year, but we're going to bring it to you anyway because so this year I think we got 8, was it 8 more? I think we got 8 more. So I'm going to bring it to you anyway every year as an adjustment. So I can bring it to you once or I can bring it to you multiple times.
Okay.
So. Okay. And the last one is our Fund 8. It's our special, local special account. The top one is receiving EC Medicaid funds, and that's just they file for those funds and get reimbursement for that, and you'll see that budgeted there, and they have to spend that back in the EC department on EC services. And then the next one is, unfortunately, you can see that the 5200, you can see 5200 063 and 5300 413, those two programs are very close, and we unfortunately posted it in the wrong one. Pre-K EC and Pre-K more at 4 are very close, so we just need to flip those back, unfortunately.
Well, and that is actually, I believe, the one that Ms. Carpenter has a question about.
Is it? Okay.
She will be calling you.
Okay.
So y'all are human after all,
We
aren't
are.
you? I had my suspicions that was the case.
Pre-K and yeah.
But can I ask, how did you detect, how did you know that this posting error occurred? What triggered
Just
knowledge that,
normal balancing and reconciling, normal
not
monthly.
auditing or external
no,
sources or
no,
people?
just our normal
Your internal
reviews,
review. Good.
normal internal
Good. You
controls.
caught it yourself. Good, thank
We
you.
did.
So you're a little bit more than human.
Yeah. Unfortunately. And then the last one is the Jimmy Johnson grant received at Irvin. And we've talked about this grant before, but it literally got deposited to the school. And we said, no, we don't deposit it at the school. We deposit it here. So we asked them to bring it here and give it to us. So that's why we have it here.
Now, is this Fund 8 that you were talking about
It is.
earlier? So
It is the Fund
more
8.
at 4 or pre-K would be stuff that we would then have to share, or would that be
No,
exempted?
they excluded that.
Okay.
As far as I can tell here. They excluded the pre-K and they excluded the JROTC, but,
Where we're basically doing a service that otherwise would be charged to Medicaid by some other entity. We then have to we would then have to share some of that fund with
Looks like
charter
it to
schools
me.
that would not necessarily be doing those services, or if they were doing those services, they would be billing Medicaid directly. So they basically
Right.
would be double dipping.
And even indirect costs. So if we get a grant and we charge indirect costs for that grant, because we should, because we're administering the grant and we're paying the payroll and we're doing all of those things, that then becomes a part of this that they would then get a portion of. So.
Yeah, board members, when I saw the Fund 8, I called Ms. Klutz up today to talk about it, because it's just one more piece of legislation that's coming after trying to transfer dollars from the public schools to the charter schools, and if the county doesn't decide that they want to reimburse us for it, it's just going to take money away from the savings that we accrue somewhere else. We're going to have to shore up the dike over in this section. So
And our school board association is lobbying on this.
they're against it completely, and it was in the Friday report. If you happen to look at it, it was in that report, I believe. From the
They sent out a legislative update, I think, on the 2nd of April.
Yeah, and just the one other note on the Jimmy Johnson grant, and we really appreciate them doing that. That was constructed this weekend. I saw some pictures on the school Facebook site. They were really excited about that being installed.
All right, so this is going on the action agenda, and now that takes us to 6.03. Thank you, Ms. Klutz. And to start with, Mr. Louder and Ms. Burns, folks, we don't want to put Ms. Burns too much on the spot. I've asked if you have questions to direct them to Dr. Louder, so that Sue doesn't have to endure sometimes we can get a little bit caustic, and I'd rather it go to Dr. Louder. So anyway, but before we get started, remember we talked earlier in this year about how to streamline our process, and this will probably be the last time, if you all agree to this, that we'll see these types of changes in a board meeting. And Dr. Louder, if you want to elaborate on that, I'll pass it on to you, please.
Yes, it's one thing that we've looked at with, a good bit of the updates we get with policy are simple things like there's just a hyperlink. That's all there is to it. Or it has changing child nutrition to school nutrition, and that's the only reason that there's been a change in the policy. And so, as you can see, all the ones that are listed here kind of fall into that category. So one thing when we talked with some other districts that and how they proceed with policy, and then we ran it by Ms. Stone and Mr. Enriquez to say, if we just have a hyperlink or we just have an A or a the, do we need to have that taken to the board to pass? And ultimately the answer was no, as long as y'all are okay with that. So if we get an update from the PLS that says this is just a hyperlink or this is a minor change, we thought we'll still email you a list of those, like for example the ones that are listed here. You'll still get these and say, hey, these are all minor changes, and you'll still be able to see them. And if a board member sees that in the email and says, hey, I really want to look at 7405, then we'll pull that out and take that to the policy committee. But if there's not a request for that, then we'll just go ahead and publish those and update them, so we don't have to go through 14 or 15 policies that don't have any kind of a change. But again, we still would have them in front of you to look at. So when we talked about that with the attorneys, and then I spoke with Mr. Shoemaker, and he said, well, let's bring that to a meeting and let kind of vote if that's the way we want to have them go, and then we'll move on. So we can certainly ask questions. I don't know if Sarah wants to speak on that.
I just wanted to also add our current policy, 2440, does provide for this, giving the superintendent authority to make technical and conforming changes to any existing policies necessitated by changes in state and federal law. The changes are effective immediately, subject to ratification by the board at its next regular meeting, and so it doesn't require the full blown out policy committee review and first read and second read. Rather, it would just sort of be brought to you all sort of as an information, and then just subject to ratification, and then we could push it out with only one meeting.
So board members, I look at it as, first I would like to entertain a motion that, if you agree with this, that we will have a motion that would say minor technical updates in the future would just be brought to the board as a consideration item only, and that way.
So moved.
All right, so.
Thank you, and thank you both, as well as Ms. Carpenter, I'm sure would thank you.
Could we apply it to the technical changes on this list?
Yes, we can.
I second that.
So, okay, but let's get the first, so technical changes, minor technical changes will be brought to the board as a consideration item on the agenda only.
I guess my only question again is, you're going to circulate it to the board members to see these things, or
Yeah, so when
how else do we get reviewed? How else do we have an opportunity to review these policies on somewhat of a regular basis?
So the way we do it now is we have a policy committee meeting, and when that meeting is over, we email to the board, here are the minutes from our meeting, here are all the policies that will be brought up for first and second read, and the content of that. And so that'll still happen. You'll still get that summary in that meeting. Now we'll just have in that same email, here's the list of the 7 policies that only had hyperlink changes or grammatical changes. And you'll still be a list, and it'll still have the policy. And then if you guys look at that and say, wow, I really want to pull out 3220, as you said, then we'll pull that out and take it to the committee. But if you don't have a question about it because we're changing a hyperlink, then we'll just move them forward.
So you'll send the whole policy to look at it if we want to look at it? Or
Yeah, we can do that.
Sure.
We can
Yeah,
do that.
we'll still say, hey, these are minor changes, and unless you have a change, but so
As
they'll
long-
still come
yeah,
from
I
it.
think as long as you send it to us so we can read, we don't have to, certainly don't have to do it at a board meeting. But it would be nice to at least see those and read through them. Because there are
if
things,
we
there are
don't-
things that we do tend to catch, or we have public input that have concerns, so that's the only.
And what we'd like to do, if we don't have that request after you send it to us to send to the next committee, then we'll just move those forward. But if we have and then we won't have to bring them up for you to vote on each time, we'll just have editing changes unless you request it. And if you do, we'll take it to the committee.
All right, so in the motion, it won't actually be brought to our agenda as a mass group. Does it have to come before us to approve these technical changes? Because I thought the way you worded it, we still have to approve the grouping of all these policies that we accepted for technical changes.
I would. There needs to be a ratification of them, and so I don't think we need to necessarily go through each and every one, but perhaps we have a single document that says, here are the 10 policies with minor updates as provided, and we can have a hyperlink out to them. And then it's simply, you all will just say, yes, we ratify those changes, and we move on, as opposed to having to go policy by policy.
As Vince just did. I mean, I think that's acceptable.
Okay, I didn't realize. So we still need to bring them here, but it'll be these are just like we have right now. These are the 10, and then we move on. Okay.
Right. And if we just, Ms. Monroe, if we title it just like you titled it here, policies with minor technical updates, then that's the flag. The policies are listed, and we can improve the whole group as we go, and we don't have to put it on the consent agenda for next meeting. So, all right. So all in favor of doing it, following this methodology for technical updates and changes that will be presented to the group for consent, say aye. Aye. Oppose? All right, so this will be this is the way we'll handle these policies. Now comes the actual policies. I heard a motion from Vince that we would put these on the consent agenda. So do we need to even do anything? We could just put these on the consent agenda for the next meeting, and that's it. All right, so we just put it on consent, and we don't even need a motion. All right? One down. 6.04, policies and policy revisions, first reading. Board members, we have about 8. Are there any comments on the PLS legislative update? No, I'm sorry. That's a summary. I'm sorry. 1710 4-4021.
Can you just do a summary of what the purpose,
Yes, sure.
generally what
The,
why the changes?
the 3 policies that pertain to discrimination, harassment, and bullying, they are all changes that came through the Office of Civil Rights, and they have either required or strongly recommended the changes that are in here. It adds sexual assault to the list of examples of sexual harassing conduct. That one is recommended. The next bullet adds a requirement that bullying policies be distributed to students, employees, and parents at the beginning of each school year, and clarifies that both components of the board's bullying policies must be publicized on the school system website and in handbook and other publications. That's required. And then the legal references are required, and the other sections are recommended. So it's really basically OCR recommendations. and requirements.
I noticed in the introduction there, it specifically calls out providing equal access to Boy Scouts. I'm just wondering, is that a legal requirement, or why are we specifically
Sarah, would you
calling?
like to speak to that?
There was a federal law a few years ago, and I'm going to blank on the precise language of it. But basically, as we as a school district cannot discriminate against the Boy Scouts because of positions the Boy Scouts may take. And so to the extent we allow other student groups, the Girl Scouts, 4-H, Boys and Girls Club, to come to our schools, we have to permit the Boy Scouts to come to our schools as well. And so that's why they get sort of specially called out due to some federal legislation that came about. And I'm going to blank exactly how long ago it was, but it does not change how we operate at all. We treat the Boy Scouts the same as the Girl Scouts, as 4-H, as et cetera, et cetera.
Moving on to the public participation at board meetings. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, this one was actually a request from Mr. Powell. I think was the first one to bring it up. So if you want to speak to that, and then we discussed it at the policy committee meeting.
Sure. I've always had a little bit of an issue with the fact that people who want to come address this board have to do so 3 days in advance and register at the Ed Center or maybe online or however. And at county commissioners meetings, that requirement is not in place. I've spoke a couple of times to the county commissioners, and I just walked up and filled out a card and read the little disclaimer and then spoke. And so I would like to, open our public meeting time. It's only once per month. It's not like it happens a couple of times a month. So to make it a little bit more accessible to people. And, in the past, the mechanism of registering the Friday before has been used in a negative fashion. At least it's perceived as a negative fashion. I can tell you that it wasn't used as a negative fashion to pass things at board meetings that maybe weren't all that popular and needed some time for people to kind of forget about it. And I didn't really like that as I was at the school level and as a parent. So maybe this goes is a small step to opening up our meetings to make them more accessible to people, even when we have difficult topics like Tim's favorite, redistricting. That's my thoughts on the matter. And prior to sending it to policy committee, I did have a conversation with Dr. Louder. He contacted me and told me that the risk that we run is that people will come up here very upset at something that happened in the school that day, that Monday morning or afternoon, and the attempt to rectify that situation in front of us as a public comment. And so that's part of the board chair's responsibility to maintain our meetings, I guess. And I don't know that that's going to be a significant problem. I can tell you from working in the school system, out in the the line of fire, so to speak, that those problems are few and far between, but they are at times significant, like Dr. Louder would probably attest to. But so there is a risk from doing this, just like at times the commissioners' meetings have comments that you would deem it possibly inappropriate, but yet they still have a right to come and say them.
So if I can summarize our discussion a little bit, and I want Ms. Stone to kind of weigh in. At the end of the day, this is the school board's meeting. To how you have people do that, I think we all said you guys are elected and you have to be accountable for that. But I think our concerns are 2 or 3. That a lot of the concerns that people have with schools are directly related to children, so another kid in my class type situation, or their teacher. So sometimes if something happens at a middle school at 4 o'clock and we get home at 5 o'clock and mom and student are upset, they may be standing in front of you at 6 o'clock on a Monday, because we have drop-in people that come here when they're upset, and then suddenly start talking about other children or teachers. And so Is that something that you can't do? No, but I think it'll take to make sure that the board chair or who's ever running that shuts that down when we're breaching into confidentiality. So that was a concern. And I think the other big part of our concern is that when somebody puts on Friday that they're going to speak, what we try to do is contact them and find out if we can find out what their issue is, because sometimes you're going to have people that show up and they haven't discussed their problem with the principal. If they could have just had a meeting with the principal, then they wouldn't be standing here to complain. So a lot of my offices before I switched jobs is to take that contact and say, well, have you spoken about it with the principal? And you'd be surprised that 50 or 60% of the time they say, well, no, I haven't. And they would say, well, let the principal call you, and then the problem gets resolved. And so we can do that when they've had to put on that they're going to be there. Then we make a phone call and we contact them. And to be quite honest with you, a lot of the time that gets resolved. Just like in redistricting, I think I mentioned earlier that I think there were 30 or so people that wanted to speak. I called them all and said, can you tell me what your issue with redistricting is? And they usually explained, and half of them or so said, oh, well, now that I know that this is going to happen, or you're not going to move them in the middle of the year or whatever, then they don't want to speak anymore. So the only thing that I think concerned us is it takes away that opportunity to resolve it, or to get you as the board information to say, you know, Ms. Burns is coming to speak and complain tonight. Here's the situation. You may have some of it in front of you. And that may resolve it before it got here. But that having been said, as we said, it's your meeting and how you want to do it. But those were just the things that we discussed. And I would say that council maybe should weigh in for you guys on what her opinion on that is.
You all can take whatever position you like in terms of this. Under statutes, we're only required to have a public comment period. We're able to make our own rules about how we organize that public comment period. I will say my experiences, and I'll echo what Dr. Louder said, you all have great folks here who do a wonderful job at customer service and sort of doing that early intervention. And so we do run a potential risk, but we can, if you want to go forward with this proposal, to open up the sign up at the beginning of the meetings, give it a try, see how it goes. If it turns into an avalanche for you, we can very easily go through this process again and try to refine and tweak it a little bit. So happy to address any questions you may have about it.
All right, board members, any other comments, or anybody want to weigh in on this?
I think if you're going to say, just so we did it on a monthly basis, we need to change that to say, you know, right, currently you have it's part of each meeting. And I think you need to say, or want to say it's part of the business meeting, is that?
It says scheduled monthly business meeting.
Yeah, this is a work session. We don't normally have public comment during a work session.
Correct. I'm missing that part where I'm reading that.
Do you see it, Mr. Walter?
I was reading the first sentence
Okay.
to that section.
Oh, I see. So you're saying that first sentence should say a part of each business meeting will be set aside.
Or other meeting
Oh.
designated by the board chair.
Actually, one of the things that the county does, and I'm sorry to walk all over you, but also in any board of adjustment meeting, when you have a hearing, they have to sign a card and put their name and address and all the pertinent information about themselves on the card, which then kind of dissuades people from just wanting to just show up and make comments, because now you've got all of their pertinent information. Rather than have a sign-up sheet, it would be better for them to submit a card. If we're going to go this route, I would rather have a card where they have to write their name and address and phone number on it.
That's
just
easily added, right?
Yeah, I think that would be a much. It's consistent with the way everybody else is doing their business.
Yeah, I think to make it consistent with the commissioners would be a good practice.
In municipalities and boards of adjustment.
Yeah, I think we do need to be more open. I've seen that issue before. If there's an issue that comes up, you've got to hit this deadline, and the deadline is that weekend. If it was the next day prior to, maybe that's different, but since our meetings are Monday, that doesn't make it really easy for a lot of folks. So I'm in favor of that change as well. But I don't want to just have anybody, coming and talking about whatever. I think it needs to be, like it says here, related to a general education related topic. And it'd be even better if it was part of constituency, but it is what it is, so it looks okay.
And once we get this, if this should probably, as the board chair, or whoever is the board chair, probably would read the paragraph generally, would read that out to each person coming up, making sure that they understand the rules of engagement, since most of the commissioners and the municipalities aren't dealing with one-on-one relationships the way we happen to deal with them. But this is the first reading, folks, so we have another opportunity to talk about this at our next, in May, right?
Can we suggest changes to this before we see it at the second reading? Is that how this works? Can we add the part about fill out a card that includes?
Yeah, I've got that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right.
Anything else?
Anybody else want to bleed on this one? Let's move on to the next one. 4316.
This is student dress code, and we have worked with schools on a process if they decide that they want to implement a school uniform policy. And this just gives some guidelines for doing that. And then we have drafted a administrative guideline that goes along with that.
What is a uniform plan?
Yeah, so what happens is about every couple of years a school says, hey, I want to have a uniform. We want to have a dress code or a uniform here. And they often in March decide they want to do that in the fall, and that's usually not a good idea. It's something you want to take the community through. And so what we did was go and borrow from other places to make sure if somebody says they want to do that, then we send them to the administrative guideline, and it has 7 bullets there to say, poll your faculty, poll the parents, have a so-and-so success rate, and when you've done these things, then you can move it forward. And so we feel like just by sending them there, you won't get lots of requests that are short-term, and it'll make them go through that. And then when somebody actually stands before you and asks for it, it will have gone through a vetting process just inherently in the process. And so Sarah rewrote the policy to direct to the administrative guideline, and that in essence solves the problem that you kind of have to do a lot of pre-work before you would bring that forward.
And then I guess my other comment was, what is the general purpose of having uniforms? The student achievement or improvement?
I think it varies. It depends on the school and the level sometimes, and that's one of the reasons why we said rather than just kind of saying, hey, I think this is a good idea, then let's go through this process.
Along that lines, I'd like to see that in the school improvement plan prior to something that can be tracked.
Yeah, and that would even be, if you've done all this and bring it before.
We have some data that shows how effective it is and if it's something that's worth repeating somewhere else.
Yeah, and I would say you could even bring that when they have done all the vetting part, they could come before you, and then you could say, well, let's make that part of the school improvement plan, and that would be fine. It's just don't make this a rash decision. Go through a process is why we changed that.
All right, board members, any other potential changes? All right, we got grants.
Actually, the 6125 administering medication to students.
Yep.
Sarah, do you want to speak?
Yeah,
on
I'll
that?
speak to this one. This is one that in working with Donna and who oversees our work with the school nurses as well as the EC department, we are beginning to see on a national level an increase in very isolated instances of complicated requests for medical care to be provided on school campuses. There are times when we're able to meet those requests and times where we aren't. And what we wanted to do was put some language in this policy that would give the board an out and an ability to say, you are asking for a very high level of medical intervention to be provided at school, and we are not comfortable doing so. Sometimes these are off-label treatments, not FDA-approved treatments, uses of a drug that a physician has ordered be provided to a student. But for various reasons, in consultation with our school nurses and other professional staff, there is concerns about having that be provided at school. And so this is some language I've seen a couple other boards here in the state recently adopt, and it seems to be a trend on the national level as well. And so I just recommended that we include this in our policy, not saying we won't, but saying that it gives us the option depending on the very specific situation.
How do you know if it's an off-label use?
Our nurses will tell us that.
All right, board members, any more comments on that one? Then let's move on to 8210, grants and funding for special projects. We had a little bit of
I think this is,
discussion.
Dr. Phillips actually directed us to review this one and look at it, and I think Sarah did some work to develop the policy, right?
I did. So this was the policy request that came from Dr. Phillips in relation to how we handle future similar requests, similar to the one we had at Northwest Middle School earlier this year regarding the NFL matching the grant. And I know we had a lot of discussion over how we're going to handle this going forward. And so what I've proposed here in this policy revision is taking our existing policy 8210 that talks about how we handle grants and special projects when they're initiated by the school, and adding a new provision in there, this language in red regarding grants and funding for special projects initiated by community groups, initiated by groups that are not affiliated with the school. And in working with the policy committee, the proposal we came up with was, one, we want to support these efforts. But two, we want to make sure every board has the ability to say whether or not it's going to be able to fund such projects. And so we've put a mechanism in here that basically states, as a part of your annual budgeting process, a board may allocate funds to be available for matching community grants. So every year, as you all go through the budgeting process, you can make the decision, this year, do we want to set aside $30,000, $50,000, $100,000, whatever that pool of money is going to be available for matching grants for that school year. If so, you set that money aside, you alert the community that this funding is available, and they can come to you with various proposals, and then each and every board, so that you all can make your decision this year, and the board 5 years from now can weigh its priorities then, can decide how it wants to allocate those funds and support the various projects. And so I hope this addresses the concern and interest you all had in wanting to have the flexibility to address these projects, yet also ensure that the money is being allocated in a fair and appropriate manner.
Go ahead.
An organization I can think of which makes grants to the school system on a regular basis might be the Cabarrus Education Foundation. Would this policy apply to them or only for other purposes?
The Education Foundation makes grants to our employees, makes grants to our teachers. Our teachers submit those grants, so they follow under the first paragraph of this policy. The how do we handle grants for ourselves. This paragraph handles I am the outside community group. I want to apply for a grant from a third outside community group, and I need Cabarrus County Schools to match my grant. So the NFL partnership at Northwest Middle is sort of the perfect example of what we're talking about here, very separate and apart from our current relationship with the Education Foundation.
All right. Any more comments on this one? All right, let's move on. 6.05 is the MOU on the city. They made a small change.
Yes, there is, the board's already approved this contract. There was a small change. I've noted them there in paragraph 2. The word term to amended, the word amended rather than renewed. In paragraph 6, removed the name Eddie Moss and referred to a sergeant. And then paragraph 28 referenced the MOU. So those were minor changes the city had requested and Sarah's reviewed and we've talked about. I think we're comfortable with them, the folks that have reviewed them.
Okay. Any comments? All right. Thank you.
Consent?
Consent, yes. Consent. And consent for the others. I'm sorry, Ms. Monroe.
Policies.
Yes, 6.04 is consent. 6.05 is consent. 6.06 is the Royal Oaks Replacement Facility, same site program and site selection.
So obviously I'm not
Dr.
Dave
Van
Burnett.
Hukelum, come forward.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Dave is at a funeral with his family, so we obviously respect his time away from us this evening. He'll be back with us next Monday to answer a lot of detailed questions that you're probably going to generate today. Christine is with me here in the back, so she'll be taking copious notes of questions you might have around details that come up during your discussion. And she might even be able to answer some questions that I probably might not be able to answer. So if so, she'll jump up here, right? All right. I want to thank Mr. Shoemaker and Mr. Powell, who are part of the construction committee and talked about this at length. Before we kind of jump in, I do want to ground us a little bit, going back to our retreat in some of the context for all the new construction you're going to hear about over the next 5 to 10 years, and just remind our public of our need. And so you have two big buckets of construction need. One is replacement facilities, upgrades to our facilities. We know that's $250 million. In addition, we know people are moving to Cabarrus County, and that's another $250 million. So we can't keep that enough in the front of our public as we continue to make these decisions. And to the extent that we can have a facility that addresses both of those needs, we need to work to do that. However, I think Royal Oaks is probably not in a position to help us on the new construction side. It's not going to be able to add new seats to the new families that are moving to Cabarrus. So all the options you're going to hear about tonight really address updating our facilities, and the question is going to be whether we update one school or multiple schools, try to tackle multiple schools at the same time. One question that the committee wrestled with was, can a replacement school help with growth issues? And the general consensus was no. Royal Oaks is not going to help us with the growth in the Harrisburg area, Central, and Cox Mill area of our county. The next question that the committee wrestled with was, can a replacement school help our aging facilities? Obviously, it will help the Royal Oaks facility. The question on the table is, can it help more than one facility? And that's what you're going to hear tonight, is multiple options that you're going to have to wrestle with and see pros and cons of the individual choices and what you want to request from the commissioners for additional funding in addition to the bond, which I believe is $11 million. Is that right? Okay. So let's work through the four options that the committee kind of came to. Option number one is to rebuild Royal Oaks as it is. Okay. Under this option, you have some key components here. Royal Oaks right now is about 360, 370 students at any given year. So we would build it for that, just replace that school. The core capacity of 450 students. You can see some of the other specifications there regarding the building. 71,000 square feet. The building cost would be $158 dollars per square foot. The building cost would be 11.2, but the total cost would be $18 million, requiring you to request another 6.8 from the county commissioners. This would allow us to keep the pre-K building on that site, and that would add 90 to 100 pre-K spots, which we know we have a waiting list for that, and we believe that'd be great for that community. Here's some pros and cons to that scenario. As we've heard multiple times from Ms. Carpenter, we do have, she believes we have a historical commitment to that community. Another pro, we wouldn't have to redistrict, less money to request from the county commissioners, and we would be able to keep that idea of having an expanded pre-K program for our most at-risk 4-year-olds in this county. Some of the cons is it does the project cost, which Dave explained to me is different than the building cost. The building cost stays constant in all of these scenarios at $158 per square foot, but the project cost changes based on how much you're going to do, and it goes down the more you do. So the project cost for this would be the highest of the four options per square foot. You lose opportunity to add space for the growing county, and you lose opportunity to address multiple schools if you choose this particular option. Option number two is a little bit more expansive option. This is going to be the recommendation of the superintendent. Key components here are expand the capacity of the school to 648 students with a core capacity of 800. You can see the specs there. This would also keep the pre-K building, the 1998 building for pre-K. So let me explain that real quickly. The 650 would be kindergarten through 5th grade students. then an additional 90 to 100 pre-K students on that site. So your total number of students would be 750 students. That's why the core capacity is higher. Some pros and cons here that we've thought of. Obviously, we get to use existing land. That's true for the first one as well. You would add 250 more seats to our district capacity. You would keep the Royal Oaks community pretty much intact. Okay, and there's kind of this belief of smaller schools are better, in particular for our most at-risk students. Remember, Royal Oaks is 85% free and reduced lunch students. Okay, the other thing we need to remember is we have a pretty skewed perception of what a big school or a small school is in Cabarrus County schools. We can't even imagine a school less than 1,000, yet many schools, elementary schools around the country are 500, 300 to 500 students. So we have a little skewed perception there. Again, another pro for option number 2 is we would be able to expand our pre-K by 90 students by keeping that 1998 pre-K building. We believe that's good for our community. Again, our most at-risk 4-year-olds. If there's one thing we do know from research is that early child education works. And the more we can expand early childhood education for our students, especially our most at-risk kids, the better our community will be. Some cons, the project cost still is higher than the last 2 options you'll see. You're going to have to request a little more money from the county commissioners, $12 million now in addition to your bond to get from the county commissioners. Again, this is option 2, and this is the recommendation of the superintendent. Option number 3 is to rebuild Royal Oaks on its site for 800 students. Again, increasing the capacity. You can see the specs there. A key difference in this proposal is that we would now be using the 1998 building for kindergarten through 5th grade. So option number 3, you lose the pre-K expansion. Pros and cons here: you use the existing land, you add more seats. You can address multiple facilities issues, obviously through redistricting, right? Your project cost goes down because you're building more the same place. You'd have some cons there are significant redistricting or closing of a school. If you choose to close one of our smaller schools, you'd be requesting more money and no pre-K expansion. One of the things I noticed as I went through the proposal was I had a question is why option 2 and 3 were very similar in cost, and it took me a while to recognize that the key difference there is in option 3 we're using the 1998 building for kindergarten through 5th grade students, so that lessens the cost of that 800 student building, whereas in option 2 we're keeping that separate to expand our pre-K program. Then the 4th option that the construction committee talked at length about was a new site. Okay, and so this is building a new school for 800 students on a different site. This particular option really kind of comes at it from an angle of addressing our small schools, combining potentially Royal Oaks with Beverly Hills, and closing 2 small schools in favor of 1 brand new elementary school. The design capacity again is 800. You can see the other costs through there. These have some missing components because obviously you don't have a site. Okay, and I believe one of you at least is on the site selection committee, and so there has been some work done to look at various sites in the area and do some due diligence as to whether there are appropriate sites available to do something like this. And, we'll be talking about that later in closed session. Some pros for this is potentially you can address the facility needs of 2 schools in one go. Okay, you're going to repurpose or sell one or both of the old sites. And one example that was mentioned in the construction committee is we've been talking about the need to move the PLC to another location. So potentially through that process you would be able to move the PLC, the Performance Learning Center, to one of the schools that you would close. Okay. Some significant cons to consider. One is the historical context, going back to Carolyn's point multiple times, and the combining of 2 communities. The redistricting that would go with that, and the emotional connection that these communities have to their small schools. Okay. Finding an appropriate site is also a significant barrier at this point, from what I understand. Again, I haven't been privy to a lot of that conversation. I know there's been a lot of searching for a site and looking at a site, but I'm not sure there's a site that's ready to be chosen right now. Then you'd have to purchase that site, etc. Costs are unknown, so when you look at this site, the costs could vary widely, and of course there's no pre-K option. And from the curriculum guy, I'd love to see more pre-K availability for our students. So that to me is one of a big point for me.
Why again is there no pre-K?
Because we're going to move to a different site. So
You
that we're not
couldn't
going to
repurpose one of those other sites as a pre-K site?
potentially, yeah,
mean,
that's
that
true.
would-
Yeah, yeah. Hadn't thought of that. Yes, Rob. Again, the recommendation from the superintendent, I know Dr. Louder is coming on the tail end of this, so a lot of this work was done through Dr. Shepard, is the option number 2, which is 650 students on the site with the pre-K center that pushes up to 700. You can read some of the bullets there to kind of see the thinking behind that recommendation to you, and that's what we're bringing to you tonight to talk about and answer any questions that I probably won't be able to answer, and get back to you next Monday.
Thank you, Dr. Van Hukelum. Well, Vince and I were both in the construction committee meeting, so Vince, do you have any comments that you want to make since we were there together? I'll give you a first opportunity to make some comments on that.
In all these options, it says that the building cost is a fixed per square foot, but expanding classroom space is the cheapest space available. So I've heard from other architects that were very clear that the bulk of the cost is wrapped up into the core capacity in the cafeteria and the gym and some of those expansive spaces. So adding classrooms is the cheapest square footage you can have, but yet in our larger capacity buildings, we're still assuming the same square footage cost, which I think is inaccurate, at least according to the information that I've gotten. I don't know what the difference in costs necessarily would be. I haven't explored it to that degree, but I've heard a number of times classroom space is cheaper than core capacity space. And then, like Rob mentioned in option 4, we actually may have a better pre-K option. We may have two pre-K options to expand it to possibly include maybe Kannapolis, or we have space to do some creative things if we so choose. That's it for now.
All right. Any other board members want to react?
No, this is the first I've seen it, so I need a little more time to look at these options. But as we've talked about before, we have a bond for $11 million, and there's no option 5 here to what can you do with the $11 million?
Well, we talked about that in the construction meeting.
Okay, that
and
didn't come
there's
in.
no way we can build a school for 400 students for $11 million. There's no, unless you want to build a warehouse structure, literally, there's no way we can build
To
it.
add another classroom and just demolish the front part there and add some, I don't know.
Well,
I've not seen anything like that. That question has not been asked, or that I'm aware of, at least in the couple of construction meetings I've been in.
that question was asked. In our meeting, Dave answered it because we asked him about the $11 million. He says, I could not build a school to the standards that we have right now for that $11 million. He says we would have to completely go somewhere else with it, and it wouldn't be a 50-year structure for $11 million. Plus, yeah.
I understand, but
I don't know. We had asked how much money needs to go into Royal Oaks to fix it up to a level, the appropriate level, and I think that number came back to 4-point-something million, wasn't it? I don't. Was that an email that we had?
Yeah, sir. What I would like to add to that figure of $4 million, that is a number that was derived by the Fanning Howey report. That's based on an in-kind replacement of the items that need to be renovated. In other words, putting it back using the same materials, which in most cases is not possible, as was originally constructed. So that's really not a viable number.
All right, well, if it's not 4, it's 5 or 6 or something, but it's still less
You would
than-
probably end up being closer to that 11 million figure. We could try to get you some numbers on that if you would like.
Let Jeff go.
Well, I mean, the other thing, if you're talking about renovating the existing structure, then you have to put the children somewhere else where you're doing the renovation.
Yes, sir.
And so there's some costs involved in that. But I would just point out, it's like the library at that school is a former gymnasium. It's basically got what looks to me like it was a swimming pool or something in the middle of it. It's not handicap accessible. You can't just update. You put new
No,
carpet in it and say, "Oh, it's
that
done."
would have to clearly
It
be,
has
that
to,
whole
there are-
section would have to be replaced.
Yeah, so we're not talking about a replacement, a renovation. We're
sir.
talking about having to knock down some buildings and rebuild them, and I think that's when you get into the challenge of, what can you do with 11 million?
The reference to apples and oranges is exactly what applies here. And those numbers are a good number to look at, but they do not represent the true cost. And I believe what Mr. Shoemaker is trying to get at is if you build the school for 100 students, you still have to have the ancillary components to the school. And that's where Dave is trying to explain to you that you're not going to be able to build that school for $11 million. So you can chop off as many classes as you want. You still have to be able to meet the functions and the functionality of the school and the requirements of the program. Yes, sir.
I had a question on the final slide. There's the third bullet point is about craft reassignment zone. Could you elaborate, you or Dr. Lauder elaborate on that?
So it became evident during the construction committee that the multiple committees would have to work together to decide, where those students would come from. So if we expand, currently at 360, let's say at Royal Oaks, we're going to expand to 650. You want to fill up the school, so you would have to take students from most likely Beverly Hills and Weinkauf attendance zones. There was also talk of that providing some surge space at some point in time for other reconstructions in the future, but that was quickly kind of talked about as a long time from now. So Weinkauf is approaching 900 students, so it is surprisingly a growing school. We were actually pretty shocked when we did teacher allotments this year that Weinkauf received more teachers because of their increasing enrollment. Again, that's a school of upwards of 70% free and reduced lunch, 900 kids. It's not a bad thing to decrease their enrollment to the extent possible. So that's where some of those students would come from.
But then we have, over Boger, we have significant space or capacity space if we don't go with what we talked about earlier.
That's right.
But at Boger, we just talked about 400 and some students sitting on the pipeline just waiting to have a house built for them. 10% of them are multifamily. So, we this is the second wave of redistricting that I alluded to that could possibly, as we begin to churn around and try to figure out how we fill this school up. This is where we would be looking at making some moves to move students around to utilize our space in the most allow growth, but they also utilize our space better. So, but looking at $11 million, if you take the $253 a square foot, just as that project cost for option one, and you divide it in there, you get 43,000 square feet. Well, that's not even half the square footage. That's for the total project. That's not half the square footage you need for the core of 450. And so, right now, unless we were to build something like a Target big box style building and then figure out how to subdivide it, I don't know how we can get $11 million and build a school, at least, and we would probably have to find some other property to do it on as well. that was one of the county commissioners. Yeah, one of our county commissioners told us that that's how much we needed to build that school. That was the same one that also told us we only needed $13.5 million for Mount Pleasant Middle School.
So I'm hearing a couple of things I need to add, and one is option number 4. Because we'll have 2 potentially existing buildings, we would be able to do pre-K at one of those potentially if we wanted to, or both. Yep. And you also have the opportunity with the PLC to move the PLC into another location as well, which would give you seats at Jan Freeze.
I guess you would have some demolition costs.
Yeah.
Proportion to that
That's
building.
right. Yep.
And I believe Mr. Burnett's going to have more information for option 4. He is doing a ops survey on that. So he just didn't have the information available to present to us tonight, but he said he would, when I talked to him last week, he said he would have that available to us by next meeting. So we'll see more information for option 4 for a couple of the sites that were under review by the site committee.
Plus we need the data back from the geotechnical survey that we just authorized, because if it comes back and says, well, you can't really build at the Royal Oak site, then that it makes that a lot clearer.
Yeah.
Well, he won't have the geotechnical until we actually, well, he's done the geotechnical on the Royal Oak site, but he won't have any geotechnical from these other sites. He's just doing an op survey on those sites to find out how much it would cost to create a level enough spot to put the school, and then look at the stacking requirements. And one of them has a pond on it, so he's going to look at, how could that be integrated into the design of the school and that type of thing. So. All right, board members. We don't. Any more questions on these? Any more clarifications that you need? Of course, Rob has asked the one about the 11 million. So I guess what we should do is ask Dave what could he bill for $11 million? Yeah, total project costs.
Since we've already decided on an architect, which in my opinion, like I said at construction committee, I think it was out of order, but since we've already decided on that, can we not get some sort of data from the architect about what can be built for 11 million?
Yeah.
Since they technically are selected already.
And is that something that needs, what's the intention of the board for next Monday? Or is there a deadline that we need to keep in mind as far as the bond money and when we have access to it? Do we need to make a decision by next Monday? You need to have all this data?
Well, we need to begin making some decisions on this program. We can't just keep kicking this can down the road, because sometime the commissioners need to know what we want and what we're going to do. So, what other questions do you have? The 11 million to me is not a pertinent question, but I know you're really interested in it, and so it's a burning issue. I guess we need to get it off the table once and for all. So we really need, and Vince has got a good suggestion, perhaps our architects can tell us how much we could bill for $11 million, what kind of program capacity that might look like. I don't know if they would, so if we had an $11 million budget, what would we be able to program? Right now the recommendation is option number 2. So what does the board think about that option in lieu of everything else that's been presented? Because we really need to comment that that's what Dr. Lauder and his staff have recommended.
Well, I'm concerned with the location and concerned with how you're going to fill the school. You just have 300. How many? What do we have now? We have 300 students that are in this.
360. Yeah.
And in order to fill the school now, we have to take a huge chunk of the other side of 85 just to fill the school now. And to try to fill it then, you've got Weinkauf, which, again, how does that play into the mix of the school and all that? And then again, the Beverly Hills situation. Are you going to just take a portion of Beverly Hills, or are you going to take, then you're completely breaking up the school. So I don't know. Those are my concerns on that
Well, I think it had been suggested earlier that this could become another magnet school with those open spaces, and that would be one way to address growth all around the county by opening up perhaps a third STEM school, or maybe there's a new type of magnet that we would have there. But that would be one possibility.
But like we said earlier, those are dominoes that go down the road, because then you don't have the middle school capacity for another STEM school.
No matter what we do here, we have to build middle schools and we have to build high schools. That shouldn't impact our decision here. This is to address a commitment made to the people in the Royal Oaks neighborhood to give them a school that is of the same quality as what my children went to.
Vince, do you have?
Well, I think if previous estimates of 17 million for 400 students, if we well, I guess now 23 million for 648 students. I guess it depends on where those students come from, but the previous was 18 million for 400 students, and if we have that same need at Beverly Hills, which is in the same place on that 10-year plan, I think the economy of scale is not realized unless we really exhaust an option to build a larger school that we can combine some smaller schools. And I know redistricting is part of that. When Patriots was built, there was as many students that are at Royal Oaks now that came from two different schools, or similar, 300 kids from two different schools. And it worked out great. It worked out really good. So I don't know. Having the school, I think the redistricting is only an issue because of the Royal Oaks location. If there was another location more centrally located, the redistricting is not really an issue because you've got lots of choices to move students around. So that's just some of my thoughts. I don't know that I'm ready to throw in the towel based on option 4 yet, because it was only started in February. I mean, this money was approved in November, and while we kind of waited until February, I kind of thought that was already done, but it wasn't. So, we're sort of rushing now, and that's okay. I think making the right decision is a little better than making the quick one in this case.
All right, any more comments on this? Well, I believe as far as redistricting concerned and using space for the magnet process, it doesn't matter whether it's at Royal Oaks or some other school that we redistrict from. We can utilize space if we need central location, because that's been one of the comments about the magnet needs to be in a more central location. Royal Oaks being on the edge of the district doesn't provide you that location. However, there's plenty of opportunities to move students around and create the magnet structure that you want, because there are actually four elementary schools within about a 3 or 4 mile radius of that area. If you put a point in the sand near them, near Boger and Weinkauf and Royal Oaks and Beverly Hills. So I don't think that the 648 saves us money. Once we get the costing on option 4, then we'll know how much that money is. Our other issue is the fact that I don't know what our commissioners are going to be able to afford. And Mount Pleasant Middle School really has recrafted the conversation, but it's not only Mount Pleasant Middle School. They're now beginning to have their concerns about several other school projects that are not nearly as fully funded, or not down the path that they need to be right now. And that's with another school district and one of our colleges. So I'm not going to talk about those because I don't know enough to, but they're concerned about the building costs as they have escalated well over 50% since we built our last school. And so, board members, that's part of what's driving us at this point. Next week we'll have the numbers from Mr. Burnett from the sites that Mr. Powell and I were talking about with him at the construction committee meeting. Hopefully they will give us some more information on option 4, and then we'll have to make some decisions. So Let's move on to the next item. Let's go to 6.07, which is some training hours for Ms. Carpenter. Is that a consent item? All right. So 6.06, Ms. Monroe, is an action item. And now we're going to move into closed session. So I need a motion to move into closed session, pursuant to General Statute 143.318.11A3, to consult with an attorney. General Statute 143-318.11A5, to establish or instruct the public body's staff, etc. General Statute 143.318.11A6, to consider qualifications, competence, performance, etc. And General Statute 115C-319 through 321. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
David Harrison moves. Do I have a second? Second. Okay. It was a painful second. All in favor of going into closed session, say aye. Aye. This meeting is now adjourned.